Hello everyone. Kindly hit the subscribe button on your screen and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I knew I was going to die on Tuesday. The clock on the prison wall ticked mercilessly as I sat on the edge of my thin mattress, staring at the concrete floor where I'd scratched 3 small stars, one for each of my children. Not my biological children. The 3 homeless kids I'd taken in years ago when nobody else would. The same 3 who were now desperately fighting to save my life. My name is Ellie Deckard, and I have 5 days left before the state executes me for a murder I didn't commit. Hey there, beautiful people. Welcome back to another story that I promise will break your heart before putting it back together again. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. I love knowing my stories reach souls across the world. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now because trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next in this journey. This is a story about mockery turned to miracle, about children the world threw away, and about how sometimes, family is what saves us from our darkest hours. It started 5 years ago on the coldest night of December. I was walking home from my late shift at the diner, bundled against the bitter wind that sliced through downtown like a knife. Most people avoided the alley behind Miller Street. It was known for junkies and trouble, but it cut 15 minutes off my walk, and my feet were already numb in my worn-out boots. That's when I heard it. A cough. Small, like someone trying to smother it. Then another. Hello? I called, my breath creating ghost clouds in the freezing air. Nothing. I should have kept walking. That's what everyone in this town would have done. That's what the sensible version of me was screaming to do. But something pulled me toward the dumpster where the sound had come from. I found them huddled together behind piled cardboard boxes, 3 children like stair steps in age, their faces hollow with hunger, eyes wide with fear. The oldest boy, maybe 12, held his arm protectively across the younger 2. The little one's lips were blue with cold. Don't touch them, the oldest boy said, his voice cracking. We're fine. But they weren't fine. The middle child, a girl, was shivering violently. The smallest boy seemed half-conscious. I remember thinking, walk away. This isn't your problem. You can barely feed yourself. Instead, I heard myself say, I have an apartment. It's small, but it's warm. And I have soup. The oldest boy, Jack, I would later learn, studied my face with eyes too old for his years. Why would you help us? It was a fair question. One I didn't have a proper answer for then. Because it's freezing, I said simply. And no one should be freezing to death behind a dumpster. What I didn't tell them was that 20 years earlier, I had been that child. Except no one had stopped for me. We don't have money, the girl whispered. I'm not asking for money, I replied, extending my hand. I'm Ellie. The little boy's eyes fluttered open, fever bright. Are you an angel? I almost laughed. No one had ever mistaken me for anything celestial before. No, honey. Just someone with a warm place to stay. I didn't know then that this moment, this simple, human choice, would eventually lead me to death row. Or that these 3 children, whom society had discarded like trash, would become the only hope I had of surviving. As we walked toward my apartment that night, I could feel eyes watching from windows, judgments already forming on neighbors' lips. In our small town of Maplewood, people didn't take in strays, especially not 3 of them at once. Little did I know, my real troubles were just beginning. And they would end with me sitting in a death row cell. Before I continue, kindly hit the subscribe button on your screen. That first night, I heated up 3 cans of Campbell's soup and watched as they devoured every drop, their eyes darting nervously around my 1-bedroom apartment as if expecting me to transform into a monster at any moment. I didn't blame them. Trust wasn't something they had much reason to believe in. You can have the bedroom, I told them, grabbing extra blankets from my closet. I'll take the couch. Why are you doing this? Jack asked again, his voice heavy with suspicion. He was tall for his age, with dark hair that fell across eyes that had seen too much. His last name was Keating, I would later learn, though I suspected it wasn't his real one. The truth was, I didn't know myself. My life was a mess of double shifts and barely making rent. I'd escaped an abusive relationship 2 years earlier and had sworn off human connections. My neighbors already whispered about that strange Deckard woman who kept to herself. I was the last person who should be taking in 3 homeless kids. Sometimes, I said finally, you just do the right thing and worry about the consequences later. The middle child, Sophia, watched me with keen intelligence. She was around 10, with tangled brown hair and a small scar above her right eyebrow. We won't stay long, she promised. Jack says we never stay anywhere long. The youngest boy, Theo, had already fallen asleep at the table, his small head resting on his arm. He couldn't have been more than 6. Where are your parents? I asked softly. Jack's face hardened. Gone. And we're not going back to foster care. They separated us last time. We won't be separated again. I recognized the determination in his voice. It was the same tone I'd used at 16 when I'd promised myself I'd never go back to my stepfather's house, even if it meant sleeping under bridges. I understand, I said, and I meant it. You can stay until you figure things out. That until stretched into days, then weeks. I enrolled them in school using some creative paperwork and a sympathetic school secretary who didn't ask too many questions. I took extra shifts at the diner. We squeezed into my tiny apartment, and somehow, we became something like a family. But not everyone saw it that way. You've lost your mind, Ellie, my co-worker Darren Hudson told me one day as we worked the lunch rush at Maggie's diner. Darren was the closest thing I had to a friend, which wasn't saying much. Those kids probably have people looking for them. You could get in serious trouble. They were freezing to death, Darren, I snapped, slapping plates onto the pickup counter harder than necessary. What was I supposed to do? Call social services like a normal person, he said, though his eyes softened. Look, I get it. You've got a good heart. But people are talking. People were always talking in Maplewood. It was a small town with big opinions and long memories. My landlord, Mrs. Jameson, cornered me one afternoon as I was bringing in groceries. This isn't a group home, Miss Deckard, she said, arms crossed over her floral housecoat. Your lease specifically says single occupancy. They're my niece and nephews, I lied. Just staying temporarily while their parents sort things out. She didn't believe me, I could see it in her narrowed eyes, but she couldn't prove otherwise. The mockery came from all directions. At the school parent meetings I awkwardly attended, mothers would pull their children closer as I passed. At the grocery store, I'd overhear whispers, that's the crazy woman who's playing house with street kids. Some even suggested I was grooming them for something sinister. What they didn't see were the nightmares that woke Theo screaming, or how Sophia would hoard food in her pockets, or how Jack would position himself between the younger two and any stranger who came too close. They didn't see me sitting up late helping with homework or teaching Theo to read, his small finger tracing letters on the page. They certainly didn't see me crying in the shower some mornings, overwhelmed by the responsibility I'd taken on, terrified I was failing these kids who had already been failed by everyone else. But the kids saw. They saw everything. Why do people hate us? Sophia asked one evening as we walked home from school, ignoring the stares of neighbors. They don't hate you, I said, adjusting the grocery bags in my arms. They just don't understand. They think you're stupid for keeping us, Jack said bluntly. At 13 now, his edges were getting sharper rather than softer. I stopped walking and turned to them. Listen to me. Taking you 3 in was the smartest thing I've ever done. Don't let anyone make you believe different. Something changed in Jack's expression then, a crack in the armor he'd built around himself. He took one of the grocery bags from my arms without a word, but it felt like progress. What none of us knew was that someone was watching us closely. Someone whose hatred would eventually send me to death row, fighting for my life while the 3 children I'd saved became my only hope for survival. I just didn't know it yet. I remember the exact moment our fragile peace shattered. It was a Tuesday afternoon, almost a year after the kids had come into my life. I was picking them up from school when a sleek black car pulled alongside us. The window rolled down, revealing a face I'd hoped never to see again. "Hello, Eleanor," said Victor Rain, my ex-boyfriend. "Looks like you've been busy." The children tensed beside me, sensing danger the way only children who've lived on the streets can. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes as he surveyed the kids. "Playing mommy now? How adorable. What do you want, Victor?" I kept my voice steady despite the fear clawing up my throat. "Just saying hello to an old flame," he said, but his gaze lingered on Sophia, who stared back with unflinching defiance. "Cute kids. Where'd you find them?" "Under a bridge." Jack stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of his siblings. "Leave us alone." Victor's smile widened. "Got yourself a little protector, Eleanor? That's sweet." He looked back at me, all pretense of friendliness gone. "We have unfinished business, you and I. Don't think I've forgotten." As his car pulled away, Sophia tugged at my sleeve. "Who was that, Ellie?" "No one important," I lied, but my hands were shaking. "Just someone I used to know." That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone. I should have called the police, reported that Victor had violated the restraining order I'd fought so hard to get. But in our small town, Victor's family had connections. His father played golf with the police chief. His uncle was a judge. When Victor had put me in the hospital 2 years earlier, those same connections had ensured the charges were reduced to a misdemeanor. I still had the scar above my eyebrow where the glass had cut me. Now I had the children to think about. Children with no legal documentation showing they belonged with me. Children who'd run from the system. If I drew attention from authorities, I could lose them. So I did what too many women do. I stayed quiet and hoped the threat would pass. It didn't. For 2 weeks after Victor's appearance, I jumped at every sound. I changed our routines, took different routes home, and made the kids promise never to open the door to anyone. I installed a cheap security camera above our apartment door using my entire tip money from that week. Paranoid? Maybe. But Victor Rain wasn't a man who made empty threats. On a Friday evening in late September, I was working a double shift at the diner. Darren had called in sick, leaving us short-staffed during the dinner rush. My phone vibrated in my apron pocket, a text from Jack. "Someone's been knocking on the door for 10 minutes. Not answering like you said." My heart stopped. "Is it him?" I texted back. "Can't see. Sophia thinks it's a woman." I should have called the police. I should have asked my neighbor to check. Instead, I told my manager I had a family emergency and ran the 8 blocks home, lungs burning with each breath. The hallway outside our apartment was empty when I arrived, fumbling with my keys. As soon as I opened the door, 3 bodies collided with mine, the kids hugging me with unusual desperation. "Someone was trying to get in," Sophia whispered. They kept knocking and then tried the handle. I checked the security camera footage on my phone. The grainy video showed a woman I'd never seen before, a middle-aged, well-dressed, repeatedly knocking and then peering through our peephole. "Probably just had the wrong apartment," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Let's make dinner, okay?" That night, as the kids slept, I sat by the window watching the street below. Around midnight, I noticed the black car parked across the street, the same one Victor had been driving. My blood turned to ice as I watched him step out, look up directly at our window, and smile before walking away. The message was clear: he knew where we lived, and he was watching us. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. We needed to leave Maplewood, immediately. I had a cousin in Montana who might help us, at least temporarily. I called in sick to work, withdrew my meager savings, and started packing essentials into duffel bags. "We're leaving?" Theo asked, clutching his worn stuffed dinosaur. "Just for a while," I promised. "Like an adventure." Jack, now 14 and increasingly perceptive, pulled me aside. It's because of that man, isn't it? Your ex? I nodded, seeing no point in lying. He's dangerous, Jack. I can't risk him hurting any of you. Something shifted in Jack's expression, a hardness I hadn't seen since those first days when I found them behind the dumpster. We're not running because of him. This is our home now. Jack! No, he interrupted, voice low so the others wouldn't hear. We've been running our whole lives. I'm tired of it. We all are. This isn't the same. It is, he insisted. You taught us to stand up for ourselves. To not let bullies win. His eyes held mine. You're the only person who ever fought for us, Ellie. Let us fight for you now. I stared at this boy, not quite a man but no longer a child, and felt something between pride and terror. This isn't your battle. You made it ours when you took us in, he said simply. Before I could respond, someone pounded on our door, loud, authoritative knocks that made Sophia and Theo freeze in the living room. Through the peephole, I saw 2 police officers. My heart dropped to my stomach. Miss Eleanor Deckard, one called through the door. Maplewood Police. We need to speak with you. I opened the door with trembling hands, positioning myself to block their view of the half-packed bags. Can I help you, officers? The older officer, whose nameplate read Collins, regarded me with cold eyes. Are you acquainted with Victor Rain? My mouth went dry. He's my ex-boyfriend. We haven't been together in years. Why? Officer Collins exchanged glances with his partner. When was the last time you saw Mr. Rain? He drove past us about 2 weeks ago. Made some threats. I hesitated. He was parked outside last night, watching our apartment. Did you approach him at any point last night? No, I stayed inside. Why are you asking me this? The second officer pulled out a notepad. Where were you between midnight and 2 a.m. this morning, Ms. Deckard? A cold dread washed over me. I was here, with the children. Sleeping. Can anyone besides these children verify that? Officer Collins asked, peering around me at Jack, Sophia, and Theo, who had moved protectively closer. No, I live alone with I faltered, unsure what to call them. They weren't legally mine. With them. Ms. Deckard, Officer Collins said, his voice hardening. Victor Rain was found dead this morning in the alley behind the Red Door bar. He was stabbed multiple times with what appears to be a kitchen knife. The room tilted around me. And you think I had something to do with it? That's ridiculous. A witness places someone matching your description arguing with him outside the bar shortly before his estimated time of death. That's impossible, I said, my voice rising with panic. I was here all night. Your fingerprints are on file from your previous incident with Mr. Rain, the younger officer said. We'll need you to come with us to answer some questions. I can't just leave, I gestured toward the kids. There's no one to watch them. We've already contacted Child Protective Services, Officer Collins said. They're on their way. The words hit me like a physical blow. CPS. The very system the children had fled from, the system that had separated them before. Jack stepped forward. She didn't do anything. She was here all night. I woke up around 1 with a nightmare, and she made me hot chocolate. The officer's expression didn't change. We'll take your statement, son, but right now, Ms. Deckard needs to come with us. Sophia grabbed my hand, her small fingers digging into mine. Don't let them take us, she whispered. I knelt down to their level, trying to keep my voice steady despite the terror clawing at my throat. Listen to me, all of you. This is a mistake. I'm going to clear it up and come back for you. I promise. You can't promise that, Jack said, his eyes too knowing. Once they take us, they'll split us up again. I won't let that happen, I vowed, though I had no idea how to keep that promise. As the officers led me out, I looked back to see the three of them standing in the doorway, 3 children I had no legal right to, 3 children who had become my entire world. Theo was crying silently. Sophia stood rigid with shock. And Jack's expression was one of pure determination. "We'll fix this," he called after me. "Whatever it takes." I didn't know then that whatever it takes it would become our mantra over the next 4 years. I couldn't have imagined that this moment would be the beginning of a nightmare that would end with me on death row, counting down the days until my execution. Or that these 3 children, whom society had discarded, whom neighbors had mocked me for taking in, would become my only hope of survival. At the police station, everything happened with terrifying speed. My kitchen knives were confiscated. A witness claimed to have seen a woman matching my description arguing with Victor outside the bar. Security camera footage showed someone of my height and build walking toward the alley at 12:47 a.m., though their face wasn't visible. Most damning of all, Victor's blood was found on a towel in my bathroom trash. I was arrested for first-degree murder. I'm being framed. I screamed as they processed me. Someone planted that evidence. Victor threatened me, he was watching our apartment. But in a town where Victor's family had influence, where I was already viewed as an unstable woman harboring runaway children, no one listened. The public defender assigned to my case looked at me with tired eyes when I told him about Victor's history of abuse, about his threats, about my suspicion that someone had planted evidence. Without concrete proof of someone else's involvement, we're looking at an uphill battle, he said, shuffling through papers. The prosecution has physical evidence, a witness, and you have a documented history of conflict with the victim. A history where I was the victim, I corrected bitterly. He sighed. The fact that you were planning to flee town doesn't help your case. I was trying to protect the children from Victor. Children you had no legal right to have in your custody, he reminded me. Ms. Deckard, I'll do my best, but you should prepare yourself for the possibility of a conviction. What he didn't say, what I couldn't have prepared for, was that 3 years later, after appeals had failed, I would be sitting on death row. That Victor's influential family would push for the harshest possible penalty. That in our state, where capital punishment was still practiced, I would be scheduled to die by lethal injection for a murder I didn't commit. What neither of us could have predicted was that 3 street kids, now teenagers, would become my only chance at survival. The state of Tennessee doesn't waste money on luxuries for death row inmates. My cell in the women's correctional facility was 8 by 10 feet with a metal toilet, a narrow bed bolted to the wall, and a small desk where I was allowed to write letters that rarely received responses. The fluorescent lights never fully turned off, casting a sickly glow even during the designated night hours. Time becomes a strange concept when you're waiting to die. Days blend together, marked only by meal deliveries and the occasional visit from my public defender with increasingly grim updates about failed appeals. For the first 6 months after my conviction, I heard nothing about the children. It was as if they had vanished, swept back into the system that had failed them before. I wrote letters to Child Protective Services begging for information. Most went unanswered. Once, I received a terse response: the minors formerly in your illegal custody have been placed appropriately. No further information can be provided. I'd wake from nightmares where I saw Theo crying for me, or Sophia withdrawing into herself, or Jack fighting the system until they broke him. Those dreams left me gasping for air, pounding the concrete walls until my knuckles bled. Then came the letter. 18 months after my arrest, a guard delivered an envelope with handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper with 3 stick figures drawn at the bottom, 1 tall, 1 medium, 1 small. We haven't forgotten. We're working on it. Stay strong. No signature, but I didn't need one. I pressed the paper to my chest and sobbed, the first real emotion I'd allowed myself since the verdict came down. A week later, another letter arrived, this one from Sophia, now 12 years old, sent through what I later learned was a complex relay system to hide where they actually were. Dear Ellie. They separated us at first like Jack said they would. I was sent to a home in Nashville, Theo went to a family in Memphis, and Jack ran away the first night. I was so scared, but then Jack found me. He always finds us. We're together now. I can't tell you where or how. Jack says it's safer if you don't know. There's a lady helping us. She believes you're innocent. I'm keeping up with school. Jack makes me study even though we don't go to regular school anymore. Theo still has nightmares, but he's getting better. He keeps your picture under his pillow. We're going to save you, Ellie. Jack has a plan. He always has a plan. Please don't give up. Love, Sophia. P.S. Remember the woman who came to our door that night? We found her. That postscript sent a jolt through me. The mysterious woman from the security footage, I had almost forgotten about her in the chaos that followed. The letters continued, arriving irregularly but sustaining me like oxygen. They never included a return address, and I learned not to ask questions that might compromise whatever precarious situation they had established. But between the lines, I pieced together fragments of their lives. Jack, now 17, had somehow secured false identification documents. Sophia was excelling at mathematics through online classes. Theo, 10 years old, was still the gentle soul I remembered, but developing a passion for computers. Your kids are persistent, my attorney, Richard Bell, said during one of his increasingly infrequent visits. The public defender's office had assigned him to handle my appeals after my conviction, but his caseload was overwhelming, and my situation looked hopeless. What do you mean? I asked. He shifted uncomfortably. They've been calling my office. Sending emails with evidence they've collected. The oldest one, Jack, is quite determined. Hope flared in my chest. They found something. Bell sighed, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. Ellie, they're children. Their evidence is mostly conspiracy theories and internet research. I admire their dedication, but you've given up, I finished for him. I filed every appeal possible. The physical evidence against you is substantial. Without new, compelling evidence, there's nothing more I can do. 3 days after Bell's visit, I received a letter different from the others. The handwriting was unfamiliar, neat, professional. Ms. Deckard. My name is Diana Townsend. I'm a private investigator hired by 3 very persuasive young people who refuse to believe you murdered Victor Rain. I'm writing because I've uncovered some inconsistencies in the case against you that warrant further investigation. The witness who placed you at the scene has a connection to the Rain family that wasn't disclosed during the trial. The security footage that allegedly shows you walking toward the alley has gaps that weren't presented to the jury. And most importantly, Victor Rain had enemies far more dangerous than a diner waitress with no history of violence. Your attorney has been unresponsive to my attempts to share this information. The children suggested I contact you directly. Time is short. I need your help to find the truth. Diana Townsend. She included a phone number for her office with instructions to add her to my approved call list. For the first time in 2 years, I felt a flutter of something dangerous, hope. The prison only allowed calls during specific hours, and each call was monitored and limited to 15 minutes. When I finally reached Diana Townsend, her voice was brisk and efficient. The children found me 6 months ago, she explained after our introductions. Or rather, Jack found me. Walked into my office with a stack of newspaper clippings about your case and an envelope of cash I'm fairly certain he didn't acquire legally. Are they safe? I asked, my hand shaking as I gripped the receiver. As safe as 3 undocumented minors living off the grid can be, she replied. They're resourceful. Jack has been working construction under the table. Sophia tutors kids in math. Even Theo contributes by helping with computer tasks. Computer tasks. Diana hesitated. You probably don't want details about that. Let's just say Theo has developed skills that would impress people twice his age. Where are they living? I can't tell you that, she said firmly. Jack insisted their location remain confidential, even from you. For your protection and theirs. My throat tightened. Even now, they were protecting me. About your case, Diana continued. The woman at your door the night before the murder, we've identified her as Melissa Rain. Rain? As in? Victor's sister-in-law. Married to his older brother, Charles Rain. My mind raced. Why would she come to my apartment? That's one of many questions we're trying to answer. Charles Rain inherited control of the family business after Victor's death. A business that was struggling before but is now thriving. You think his own brother killed him? I think it's a lead worth investigating. The problem is, the Rains have influence in Maplewood. Getting evidence means getting past people who don't want certain questions asked. Our 15 minutes ended too quickly, but Diana promised to visit in person with any significant developments. 3 days later, my cell door opened at an unusual hour. A guard I didn't recognize stood there. You have a visitor, Deckard. In the visitation room, a woman in her 40s with copper hair pulled into a severe bun waited. She wore a tailored suit and regarded me with shrewd eyes. Miss Townsend. I guessed. She nodded once. We don't have much time. There's been a development. She slid a photograph across the table. It showed a man I didn't recognize, standing next to Victor Rain. Both were dressed in expensive suits, glasses of whiskey in hand. This is Martin Webb, Diana said. He was Victor's business partner in several ventures that weren't entirely legal. He disappeared the day after Victor's murder. His body was found in Kentucky last week. And this matters because he was killed the same way as Victor. Multiple stab wounds, same pattern. The killer wants it to look like the same person did both, like you somehow managed to kill Webb while sitting on death row. I stared at her. This could prove my innocence. It could, she agreed. If we can connect Webb's murder to the right people. But the police aren't looking at the connection because as far as they're concerned, they already solved Victor's murder when they arrested you. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. The children are convinced that Charles Rain is behind both murders. Jack has been investigating in his own way. Alarm shot through me. What does that mean? Diana's expression tightened. It means he's putting himself at risk. That boy would burn down the world to save you, Ellie. You have to stop him, I pleaded. If anything happens to any of them. I'm trying, she said. But they've been on their own for too long. They don't trust authority figures. They barely trust me, and I'm on their side. She stood to leave, then hesitated. There's something else you should know. The execution date has been set. The room seemed to tilt around me. When? 6 months from now. April 18th. 6 months, I repeated numbly. It seemed both an eternity and no time at all. We're working against the clock, Diana confirmed. But those kids, she shook her head with something like admiration. I've never seen determination like theirs. As she turned to go, I called after her, tell them, my voice broke. Tell them I love them. And to be careful. Diana's expression softened slightly. They know the first part. As for being careful. She sighed. I'll try to make them understand what's at stake. But as the days passed and April grew closer, the letters from the children became more cryptic. Reading between the lines, I gathered they were getting closer to something dangerous, something that involved the Rain family directly. We found the knife, Jack wrote in one letter. Nothing more, no explanation. Theo cracked the password, Sophia wrote in another. We know where the money went. Each letter filled me with equal parts hope and terror. Hope that they might actually find evidence to save me, terror that they would put themselves in danger to do it. Meanwhile, my case gained unexpected public attention. A true crime podcast did an episode questioning my conviction. An advocacy group for wrongfully convicted women took up my cause. #JusticeForEllie began trending on social media. 3 months before my scheduled execution, Diana visited again, this time with news that made my heart race. "We found a witness who saw Charles Rain near the alley the night Victor was killed," she said, a usually composed face animated with excitement. "And Theo, that remarkable child, managed to recover deleted security footage from a store across from the bar. It shows Charles entering the alley 7 minutes before Victor's estimated time of death." "Is that enough?" I asked, hardly daring to believe it might be. Diana's expression sobered. "Not yet. We need more than circumstantial evidence to overturn a death penalty conviction. We need proof that connects Charles directly to the murder, or proof that the evidence against you was planted." "How do we get that?" "That's where it gets complicated," she said carefully. "Jack has a plan, but it's risky. Extremely risky." "What kind of plan?" Diana hesitated. "The less you know about this, the better. Just know they're close, Ellie. Closer than they've ever been." That night in my cell, I stared at the ceiling, torn between hope and dread. My execution date was approaching with terrifying speed. Diana and the children were working desperately to save me, but time was running out. And somewhere out there, 3 children I loved more than life itself were putting themselves in danger for me. The next morning, a guard delivered another letter, this one in Jack's handwriting, more urgent than usual. "Ellie. We're getting closer." Theo found encrypted emails between Charles and Martin Webb discussing a cleanup the night Victor died. Sophia discovered that the witness who placed you at the scene was paid $50,000 by Charles 3 days after the murder. But Charles knows we're investigating. Someone broke into Diana's office last night. Her files were taken, including information about us. We're going to finish this, but we have to move fast now. By the time you get this, we'll be implementing our final plan. If it works, you'll be free soon. If not, I promised I would protect Sophia and Theo, and I will. But I also promised we would save you, and I intend to keep that promise too. Whatever happens, remember that you saved us first. You gave us a family when no one else would. Everything we are now is because of you. We're coming for you, Ellie. One way or another. Jack. I clutched the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. 3 weeks until my execution, and the children I'd taken in, the ones everyone had mocked me for raising, were now my only hope. Whatever Jack was planning, I prayed it wouldn't cost them everything they'd built. But as the clock ticked down, I realized with growing dread that they were willing to risk exactly that. 17 days before my scheduled execution, the prison went into unexpected lockdown. Guards rushed through the corridors, their faces tense as they ordered all inmates back to their cells. Through my narrow window, I glimpsed additional security vehicles arriving in the parking lot. "What's happening?" I asked a guard as she hurriedly checked my cell door. "Security breach," she muttered, already moving to the next cell. Someone tried to hack into the prison's computer system. My heart stuttered. Theo. It had to be. What were they doing? That night, the prison remained on high alert. Sleep evaded me as I paced my small cell, anxiety gnawing at my insides. Whatever Jack's final plan entailed, it had clearly been set in motion. At breakfast the next morning, whispers circulated among the inmates, something about a breach more serious than the administration was admitting. By lunch, the rumors had evolved, someone had accessed confidential files, including execution protocols. By dinner, the guards were conducting random cell searches with unprecedented thoroughness. When they reached my cell, they tore through my meager possessions with particular intensity, confiscating all the letters from the children and Diana. "What's going on?" I demanded as a guard bagged my letters. "Direct orders," he said flatly. "All your correspondence is being reviewed." "Why? What's happening?" He didn't answer, but his expression, a mixture of suspicion and something like unease, sent ice through my veins. 2 days passed without word from the outside. Then, during my allotted yard time, a guard I didn't recognize approached me. "Deckard," she said quietly, "you have a visitor." "Legal counsel." Hope surged, Diana with news, perhaps. But in the visitation room, a stranger waited, a woman in her 30s with dark-rimmed glasses and a severe ponytail. "Ms. Deckard," she greeted me, extending her hand. "I'm Vanessa Liu. I've been assigned to your case." "My case already has representation," I said, not taking her offered hand. "Where's Diana Townsend?" Ms. Liu's expression remained neutral. "Ms. Townsend is no longer involved with your case. I'll be handling your final appeals process." "What do you mean, no longer involved? What happened to her?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss Ms. Townsend's situation. I can only tell you that I've reviewed your case file and will be representing you through the remainder of your appeals." Cold dread settled in my stomach. Something was very wrong. "I want to speak to Diana," I insisted. "That won't be possible." "Then I want to know about the children." Ms. Liu's professional facade cracked slightly. "Children? There are no children mentioned in your official case file. The 3 children I was raising. Jack, Sophia, and Theo. They've been working with Diana on my case." She shuffled through her papers, frowning. "Ms. Deckard, there's no record of any minors involved in your appeal process. Ms. Townsend was working alone, as far as our records indicate. Diana had been protecting them, I realized. Keeping them out of official documentation. Can I at least have my letters back?" I asked. "They were taken during a cell search." "I'll inquire," she said, though her tone suggested it wasn't a priority. "Now, regarding your case, I should inform you that your execution date remains scheduled. The governor has already denied clemency, and our legal options are extremely limited at this point." As she droned on about procedural details, my mind raced. Diana's sudden removal from my case, the confiscation of all communications from the children, the prison security breach, they were connected, I was certain of it. That night, unable to sleep, I stared at the 3 small stars I'd scratched into the concrete floor of my cell. Where were my children now? What had happened to Diana? And what desperate plan was Jack implementing that had triggered such a response? The answer came 3 days later in the form of a newspaper that another inmate smuggled to me during meal time. "Page 3, she whispered. "Thought you'd want to see this." There, in black and white, was a headline that stopped my heart. "Private investigator arrested for evidence tampering in Rain murder case." Diana Townsend, a private investigator working on behalf of death row inmate Eleanor Deckard, was arrested yesterday on charges of evidence tampering and obstruction of justice. According to police, Townsend allegedly fabricated evidence suggesting Charles Rain, brother of murder victim Victor Rain, was involved in the crime for which Deckard was convicted. The article went on to detail how police had discovered that Diana was creating false evidence to implicate Charles Rain, including doctored security footage and fabricated witness statements. It was a setup. Charles Rain was silencing her, and by extension, silencing me. But the article made no mention of the children. No mention of Jack, Sophia, or Theo. Were they safe? Had they been caught too? Or had Diana somehow protected them even as she was being arrested? My hand shook so badly I could barely fold the newspaper. 13 days until my execution, and the one person publicly fighting for me had been discredited and imprisoned. That night, I was startled awake by the sound of my cell door opening. A guard I'd never seen before stood in the doorway. "Visitor," he said gruffly. "Special clearance." "At this hour?" I asked, confused. It was well past midnight. "Don't ask questions. Just come." Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, but what choice did I have? I followed him through darkened corridors to a small room I'd never been in before, not the usual visitation area, but what appeared to be a maintenance office. Inside, a woman in a guard's uniform stood with her back to me. When she turned, I gasped. Melissa Rain, the woman who had come to my apartment door the night before Victor's murder. "Hello, Eleanor," she said quietly. "We don't have much time." "What is this?" I backed toward the door, but the guard who'd brought me was gone. "You're Charles S.'s wife. You're the reason I'm here." No, she said, her expression pained. I'm the reason you might get out. She gestured to a chair. Please, sit. What I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about this case. Warily, I sat across from her. Why should I believe anything you say? Because Diana Townsend trusted me enough to send me here when she was arrested. Melissa reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a note in Diana's handwriting with a single sentence, "Trust Melissa. She's been our source all along." You've been helping Diana? I asked incredulously. But you're Charles Rains' wife. Yes, she said grimly. And I've been gathering evidence against my husband for years. What followed was a confession that rewrote everything I thought I knew about Victor Rains' murder. Charles and Victor weren't just brothers, they were business partners in enterprises that went far beyond their legitimate company, Melissa explained. Money laundering, primarily, for some very dangerous people. Victor wanted out. He was going to go to the authorities, trade information for immunity. And Charles killed him to stop him, I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. Yes, but it's more complicated than that. Charles needed a convincing scapegoat, someone with a history with Victor, someone who could plausibly have wanted him dead. Her eyes met mine. You were perfect. Victor's abused ex-girlfriend who'd taken in 3 street kids illegally. Who would believe your innocence over the word of the respected Rain family? But why come to my apartment that night? Were you part of the setup? Melissa's face tightened with what looked like genuine regret. I came to warn you. I'd overheard Charles and Martin Webb discussing their plan to frame you. But I lost my nerve when I got to your door. I was afraid. Charles is a dangerous man. So you left me to be framed for murder instead, I said bitterly. I've regretted that decision every day since, she said. When Diana Townsend started investigating, I reached out to her anonymously. I've been feeding her information about Charles for months. And now she's been arrested. On Charles' orders. He has the police chief in his pocket. When Diana got too close to the truth, he had her arrested and discredited. I leaned forward. What about the children? Jack, Sophia, and Theo, do you know where they are? Something flickered across Melissa's face, admiration mixed with concern. Those kids are remarkable. Jack contacted me after Diana was arrested. They've been continuing the investigation on their own. They're just children. I protested. They're not just anything, Eleanor. What they've accomplished. She shook her head. The oldest one, Jack, he found evidence in Charles's private files that Diana couldn't access. The girl, Sophia, she's been analyzing financial records that trace the money from Victor's accounts to offshore holdings. And the little one? Theo, I supplied. Yes, Theo. He's the one who hacked into the prison system. They're trying to buy you time by disrupting the execution protocols. Terror and pride warred within me. They're going to get themselves killed. They might save your life, Melissa countered. They've already compiled enough evidence to implicate Charles in both Victor's murder and Martin Webb's killing in Kentucky. The problem is getting that evidence to someone who can't be bought or intimidated by Charles. Why are you helping me now? I asked. Why take this risk? Melissa's composed facade cracked slightly. Because I'm as trapped as you are, just in a different kind of prison. Because I was a coward that night at your door, and 3 children have shown more courage than I have in my entire life. And because Charles killed my brother 2 years ago, and made it look like a suicide. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a USB drive. Everything is here. Financial records proving Charles and Victor's illegal operations. Security footage Charles deleted that shows him near the alley that night. Communications between Charles and the detective who investigated your case, arranging to have evidence planted in your apartment. What am I supposed to do with this from death row? You don't have to do anything. Jack already has a copy. He's taking it to the federal authorities, bypassing the local police entirely. But Charles suspects something. His increased security at the house changed all his passwords. I needed to get this back up to you in case Jack's plan fails. How did you even get in here? A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Money opens many doors, Eleanor. Even prison doors, for a short visit. The guard who brought you here owes me a favor, one Charles doesn't know about. She stood, checking her watch. I have to go. Hide this. She pressed the USB drive into my hand. Whatever happens in the next few days, be ready. Ready for what? For chaos, she said simply. Jack's plan isn't just about proving your innocence anymore. It's about exposing everything, the corruption, the murders, all of it. And he's planning to do it very publicly. As Melissa turned to leave, I caught her arm. Wait, you said Diana sent you. Is she all right? She's alive, Melissa replied carefully. Bail was denied. Charles has powerful friends in the judiciary. But she managed to get a message to Jack before they took her phones. After Melissa left, I was escorted back to my cell, the USB drive hidden in the hem of my prison-issue shirt. My mind reeled with everything I'd learned. Charles Raine had murdered his brother and framed me to cover up their illegal business dealings. Diana had been arrested for getting too close to the truth. And the children, my children, were still out there, fighting for me despite overwhelming odds. But Jack's plan worried me. Very publicly, Melissa had said. What did that mean? I got my answer 2 days later when the entire prison was gathered in the common area for a mandatory assembly about new security protocols. The warden was midway through his speech when the television monitors around the room suddenly flickered and changed. Instead of the usual prison informational channel, every screen displayed a teenage boy sitting at a desk, Jack, now 17, his face thinner and more angular than when I'd last seen him, but unmistakably him. My name is Jack Keating, he said, his voice deeper than I remembered. I'm broadcasting this message simultaneously to every news outlet, social media platform, and government agency in Tennessee. The guards scrambled to turn off the televisions, but they remained stubbornly on. For years ago, Eleanor Deckard was convicted of murdering Victor Raine. She is scheduled to be executed in 11 days for this crime. Jack's expression was calm, determined. Eleanor Deckard is innocent. The real killer is Charles Raine, Victor's brother. The room erupted in chaos as inmates cheered and guards shouted into their radios. I stood frozen, watching my boy lay out the case against Charles Raine with the precision of a seasoned prosecutor. We have obtained irrefutable evidence of Charles Raine's guilt, Jack continued. Behind him, documents and images flashed on a screen, bank statements, security footage, email exchanges. This evidence has been sent to the FBI, the governor's office, and every major news organization in the country. The camera pulled back slightly to reveal Sophia sitting beside him, her face more mature but her eyes still bright with intelligence. Theo stood on Jack's other side, no longer the small boy I remembered but a preteen with a determined set to his jaw. We are the children Eleanor Deckard took in when we had nowhere else to go, Sophia said. The same children everyone mocked her for raising. She saved our lives, Theo added. Now we're saving hers. The screens abruptly went black as the prison technicians finally managed to override the broadcast. Guards began herding inmates back to their cells amid the chaos. As I was escorted away, I caught snippets of conversation from the guards. On every channel, one was saying, "Internet's exploding with it." In my cell, I clutched the USB drive Melissa had given me, tears streaming down my face. The children had done it, they'd gone public with everything, putting themselves directly in Charles Raine's crosshairs. I'd never been more proud. I'd never been more terrified. That night, the prison hummed with unusual activity. Guards rushed through corridors. Administrative staff appeared in areas they rarely visited. Something was happening, but no one would tell us what. Just after midnight, my cell door opened. A grim-faced guard stood there. "Deckard. Warden wants to see you." This was it, I thought. Charles Rain had pulled strings to accelerate my execution, to silence me before Jack's evidence could be properly investigated. Instead, in the warden's office, I found a small crowd, the warden himself, looking distinctly unhappy, 2 FBI agents in suits, and a woman I recognized as the state's Attorney General. Ms. Deckard, the Attorney General said, "We need to discuss some developments in your case." "I've seen the broadcast," I said. "If you're here about the USB drive, I have it." I reached into my waistband and produced the device Melissa had given me. One of the FBI agents took it, his expression unreadable. "Charles Rain was arrested 2 hours ago," the other agent said. "His wife, Melissa Rain, has turned state's evidence against him." The Attorney General stepped forward. "In light of significant new evidence, I've ordered an immediate stay of execution and a complete review of your case." The words didn't seem real. After 4 years of fighting, of watching appeals fail, of counting down the days to my death, was it really possible? "The children," I said urgently. "Jack, Sophia, and Theo, are they safe?" The FBI agents exchanged glances. "The 3 minors who made the broadcast are currently in protective custody," one confirmed. "They're safe." "I need to see them," I insisted. "That's not possible at this time," the warden interjected. "You remain in custody pending review of your case." "But they're going to review everything, right?" I pressed. "The planted evidence, the witness who was paid off, all of it." The Attorney General nodded. "Everything will be thoroughly investigated, Ms. Deckard. If the evidence confirms what these children have alleged, you could be exonerated." "Could be?" I echoed incredulously. "Did you not see their broadcast? They laid out the entire conspiracy." "Legal proceedings take time," she said, her tone softening slightly. "But I promise you, this case now has the highest priority." As I was escorted back to my cell, my mind whirled with conflicting emotions. Hope, real hope, for the first time in years. Fear for the children who had risked everything for me. And underneath it all, a burning question: even if I was exonerated, would they let me be with the children again? They weren't legally mine. In the eyes of the law, they were still runaways, wards of the state who had been living off the grid for years. The next week passed in a blur of interviews with FBI agents, meetings with new lawyers, and a barrage of questions about Charles Rain, Diana Townsend, and the children. I told them everything, holding nothing back. 7 days after Jack's broadcast, a guard delivered a letter, the first I'd received since the prison had confiscated my correspondence. "Ellie, we did it. Charles Rain is going down, and you're coming home. The FBI agents say we can see you soon. We have a lawyer now, a real one, not a public defender. She says there's a good chance we can stay together when this is over. Diana was released yesterday. All charges dropped. She says to tell you she's sorry for getting caught, but not sorry for anything else she did. I know you're probably mad that we put ourselves at risk, but we couldn't let you die for something you didn't do. Not after everything you did for us. Remember when you found us behind that dumpster? You said, no one should be freezing to death behind a dumpster. Well, no one should die for a crime they didn't commit either. Especially not someone who saved 3 kids everyone else had thrown away. We'll see you soon. All of us. Together. Love. Jack, Sophia, and Theo. P.S. Theo says to tell you he's sorry for hacking the prison system, but not really. I pressed the letter to my chest and let myself cry, really cry, for the first time since this nightmare began. The tears were for everything we'd lost, for the years that had been stolen from us, but also for what we'd found, a family that would risk everything for each other. For years ago, I had taken in 3 homeless children whom everyone had mocked me for raising. Now those same children had saved me from death row, exposing a murderer and a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of local government. And somehow, against all odds, we might still have a chance to be a family again. The human heart isn't designed to swing between hope and despair so rapidly. In the 2 weeks following Jack's broadcast, I experienced moments of pure elation as evidence against Charles Rain mounted, followed by crushing anxiety as bureaucratic wheels turned with maddening slowness. I remained in prison, though I'd been moved from death row to a lower security wing. My new attorney, Catherine Brennan, visited almost daily with updates on my case. She was confident, competent, and privately funded, though she wouldn't tell me who had hired her. The evidence is overwhelming, Catherine told me during one visit. Charles Rain's financial records confirm everything the children alleged. The FBI has matched the knife used in Victor's murder to one from Charles S. hunting collection. 3 employees from Rain Enterprises have come forward with testimony about Charles S. illegal activities. Then why am I still here? I asked, fighting to keep frustration from my voice. It's been 2 weeks. Catherine's expression softened. The justice system that put you here incorrectly is the same one that has to get you out. We're asking them to admit a catastrophic failure that doesn't happen overnight. And the children? When can I see them? Her hesitation told me everything before she spoke. That's complicated. Complicated how? They're safe, right? They're safe, she assured me. They're in a secure facility under protective custody while the FBI builds its case. Charles Rain had connections to some dangerous people who are still at large. But I can see them. Catherine set down her pen. Ellie, there's no delicate way to say this. While your murder conviction is likely to be overturned, you have no legal rights to these children. In the eyes of the law, you illegally harbored 3 runaways for a year, and they've been living outside the system for more years since your arrest. The room seemed to tilt around me. What are you saying? I'm saying that Child Protective Services has reopened their case files. Once you're released, which I believe will happen soon, they'll make determinations about the children's permanent placements. Their permanent placement is with me, I said, my voice rising. We're a family. You have no biological connection, no adoption paperwork, no foster care certification, Catherine countered gently. The state views you as a woman who kept 3 minors from receiving proper care and education. I gave them more care than anyone else ever did. I slammed my palm on the table. I enrolled them in school. I fed them, clothed them, helped them with homework. I loved them when everyone else threw them away. I know, Catherine said. And we'll fight for you to maintain contact with them. But you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that reunification might not happen, at least not the way you hope. I spent that night pacing my cell, Catherine's words echoing in my mind. I could be exonerated for murder only to lose the children anyway. The cruelty of it was unbearable. The next morning, Catherine returned with news that should have been cause for celebration. The Attorney General is filing a motion to vacate your conviction, she announced. Based on the new evidence, they're acknowledging a miscarriage of justice. When do I get out? I asked. It could be as soon as next week, once the judge signs off. I leaned forward. And then I can see the children. Catherine's expression remained cautious. CPS has scheduled assessments of each child. They're evaluating potential placement options. Placement options. I repeated incredulously. They belong with me. I've arranged for you to have a supervised visit after your release, she said, avoiding my question. It's the best I could do for now. A visit. Like I was some distant relative rather than the only mother these children had known for years. 3 days later, Diana Townsend was permitted to visit me. She looked thinner than I remembered, with new lines around her eyes, but her handshake was firm. They're going to separate them again, I said without preamble. After everything they've been through, everything they've done, they're going to put them back in the system. Diana sat across from me, her expression grave but not surprised. I know. I've been working with Catherine on alternatives. What alternatives? Either I get to keep them or I don't. It's not that simple, Ellie. Diana leaned forward. The children have broken multiple laws over the past 4 years. Hacking, fraud, identity theft, all to save you, yes, but still illegal. The only reason they're not in juvenile detention is that their evidence against Charles Rain is so valuable. My stomach dropped. They're using that as leverage against the kids. No, the opposite. The FBI is protecting them, offering immunity in exchange for testimony. But that protection won't last forever. Once Charles Rain's trial is over, they'll be back where they started. I finished, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. 3 separate foster homes. Diana's expression shifted slightly. That's one possibility. But Jack has another plan. Another plan? Haven't his plans caused enough trouble? Despite my words, pride swelled beneath my fear. This one's different, Diana said. He wants the 3 of them to be legally emancipated. Emancipated? Jack's only 17, Sophia is 14, and Theo is 11. No judge would grant that. Not for all of them, no. But Jack has a case. He's been supporting himself and his siblings for years. He's incredibly mature, resourceful, and has demonstrated exceptional responsibility. If he were emancipated, he could potentially become Sophia and Theo's legal guardian. I sat back, trying to absorb this. But where would they live? How would they support themselves? That's where it gets interesting, Diana said. Melissa Rain has offered them her guest house. As part of her immunity deal, she's keeping some of the family assets. She feels she owes you. I don't want her charity, I said bitterly. It's not charity, it's restitution, Diana countered. And it would only be temporary. The children would have a safe place to stay while Jack establishes himself legally. And where do I fit in this plan? Diana hesitated. That's the part Jack hasn't fully worked out yet. Legally, your relationship to them remains complicated. Complicated, I echoed hollowly. They saved my life, and now we're complicated. I didn't say it was fair, Diana replied quietly. I said it was the reality we're dealing with. 5 days later, I walked out of prison a free woman. My conviction had been vacated, and the Attorney General had issued a formal apology for the grave miscarriage of justice. Charles Rain was facing multiple murder charges, along with fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. His trial promised to be one of the most high-profile cases in Tennessee history. None of it mattered as much as the supervised visit scheduled for the following day. Catherine picked me up in her sedan, driving me to a motel on the outskirts of Nashville. We thought this would be better than a government office, she explained. More private. Will all 3 of them be there? I asked, twisting my hands in my lap. After 5 years in prison, even riding in a car felt strange, the world outside the windows moving too fast, too bright, too loud. Yes, along with their caseworker and a federal agent. She glanced at me. They're still technically in protective custody until Charles Rain's associates are all accounted for. The motel room was bland and impersonal, beige walls, generic artwork, a small table with 4 chairs. I paced nervously, checking the clock every few minutes. When the door finally opened, time seemed to stop. They stood in the doorway, 3 children who weren't children anymore. Jack, tall and lean, his face more angular than the boy I remembered but with the same determined eyes. Sophia, 14 now, her hair cut short around a face caught between childhood and adolescence. And Theo, no longer the tiny boy I'd found behind a dumpster but a lanky 11-year-old with glasses I'd never seen before. For a moment, none of us moved. Then Theo broke the silence with a choked sob and ran to me. I caught him in my arms, his head now reaching my shoulder where once it had barely reached my waist. Ellie, he whispered, his voice thick with tears. Sophia joined the embrace next, her thin arms wrapping around both of us. Only Jack remained by the door, his expression a complex mix of emotions I couldn't fully read. Jack, I said over the others' heads, reaching one arm toward him. He hesitated, then crossed the room in 3 long strides and enveloped all of us in his arms. He was taller than me now, I realized with a shock. We did it, he murmured into my hair. We actually did it. We stood like that, holding each other, until the caseworker, a thin woman with a clipboard and apologetic eyes, gently cleared her throat. "I'm sorry, but I need to remind everyone that this is a supervised visit," she said. "We have 2 hours. 2 hours. After 5 years apart, they were giving us 2 hours. We sat at the small table, the children on one side, me on the other, with the caseworker and federal agent positioned near the door like sentries. The conversation started awkwardly, none of us knowing quite how to bridge the 5-year gap that separated us. "I can't believe how tall you all are," I said finally. "Especially you, Theo. And when did you get glasses?" "2 years ago," he replied. "Jack took me to an eye doctor in Kentucky. We said we were cousins. I've been keeping up with their medical care," Jack explained, a defensive edge to his voice. "Dental checkups too. We had fake IDs." The caseworker made a note on her clipboard. Jack noticed and his expression hardened. "You're writing down the illegal stuff we did to survive," he challenged her. "Maybe add that we did it because the system you work for failed us repeatedly." "Jack," Sophia murmured, placing a hand on his arm. "It's okay." But it wasn't okay. None of this was okay. "What happens after this?" I asked, addressing both the children and the caseworker. "When can we be together properly?" The caseworker shifted uncomfortably. "Ms. Deckard, as I'm sure your attorney has explained, there are procedures that must be followed. The children have been living outside proper supervision for several years. They've been trying to save my life." I interrupted. "If they hadn't lived outside proper supervision, I'd be dead in a week." "Ellie," Jack said firmly, "we've got this handled. I've filed for emancipation. The hearing is next month. And after that?" I pressed. "What's the plan, Jack?" He glanced at the federal agent before answering. "After I'm emancipated, I'm going to petition for guardianship of Sophia and Theo." "And me?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. "Where do I fit?" The silence that followed was deafening. "That's complicated," Jack finally said, echoing the word I'd come to hate. "Legally, I mean. But we'll figure it out." "We always wanted to come back to you," Sophia added earnestly. "That was always the goal. But now there are obstacles," Jack continued, choosing his words carefully with the officials present. "Your record, even with the murder conviction overturned. The fact that you never had legal custody of us to begin with. So we're back where we started," I said bitterly. "With everyone trying to keep us apart." "No," Jack leaned forward, his eyes intense. "We're not those same scared kids hiding behind a dumpster. We've got resources now, connections. The public is on our side. Diana's helping us," Theo added. "And Ms. Brennan." "And we're helping ourselves," Sophia said. "I'm taking accelerated classes online. Jack's got a legitimate job lined up once he's emancipated." "I'm learning coding," Theo piped up. "Legally this time." They spoke with such confidence, such determination, these children who had grown up without me, who had been forced to become adults too soon. Pride mingled with grief in my chest. They had accomplished extraordinary things, but I had missed so much. The 2 hours passed too quickly. As our visit came to an end, the caseworker stood. "I'm afraid it's time." Panic rose in my throat. "When can I see them again?" "That will be determined at the next case review," she replied with practiced neutrality. "Given the unusual circumstances, it's difficult to say." "Difficult to say?" I echoed, my voice rising. "They saved my life. They exposed a murderer. And you're telling me you don't know when I can see them again?" The federal agent stepped forward. "Ms. Deckard, please remain calm." "Don't tell me to be calm. These are my children." "Legally, they're not," the caseworker said quietly. The room fell silent. "Ellie," Jack said finally, his voice steady. "We've survived 5 years apart. We can handle a few more weeks until we sort this out." "A few more weeks?" I stared at him. Is that how long you think this will take? Jack's expression was that of someone much older than 17. However long it takes, we'll do it. We found a way to save you from death row. We'll find a way to be a family again. As they prepared to leave, each child hugged me, Theo clinging a moment too long, Sophia whispering "We love you" in my ear, Jack's embrace firm and protective. Then they were gone, escorted out by the officials, leaving me alone in the motel room that suddenly seemed vast and empty. Catherine returned an hour later to drive me to the small apartment she had arranged for me, a transitional space until I could get back on my feet. The world outside felt strange and threatening, too many people, too much noise, too much freedom after years of confinement. They've grown up without me, I said as we drove. They don't need me anymore. Catherine glanced at me. That's not true. They spent for years fighting for you. That's not what people do for someone they don't need. But will they let us be together? Legally. I won't lie to you, Ellie. It's an uphill battle. You have a criminal record, not the murder charge anymore, but other issues from your past. You have no job, no savings, no permanent address. The state generally requires stability before considering placement. So even though I'm innocent, even though those children saved my life, I still might lose them. The injustice of it was suffocating. I didn't say we would lose, Catherine said firmly. I said it would be difficult. The apartment was small but clean, a studio with basic furnishings provided by a prisoner reentry program. Catherine showed me how to use the electronic key card, explained the public transportation options, and left me with some grocery basics and a prepaid phone. Get some rest, she advised. We have a meeting with CPS tomorrow to discuss your case. After she left, I stood in the middle of the empty apartment, freedom feeling oddly like another kind of prison. 5 years of fighting to stay alive, of clinging to hope that I would be exonerated and reunited with the children, and now here I was, free but still separated from the only family that mattered to me. I tried to sleep but couldn't. The bed was too soft after years on a prison mattress, the silence too complete without the constant background noise of the cell block. Around 3 a.m., I gave up and sat by the window, watching occasional cars pass on the street below. My prepaid phone rang the next morning, an unknown number. Hello? I answered cautiously. Ellie, it's Diana. Something's happened. Turn on the news, any channel. Heart racing, I fumbled with the TV remote. A breaking news banner scrolled across the screen, prison transport attacked, Charles Rain at large. The reporter's voice filled the small apartment, during a routine transfer between facilities. Sources say the transport van was ambushed by armed men in 2 vehicles. 2 corrections officers were injured in the attack. Charles Rain, accused of murdering his brother Victor Rain and business partner Martin Webb, is now the subject of a multi-state manhunt. Oh my God, I breathed. The children. They're moving them to a different safe house right now, Diana said urgently. The FBI is concerned Rain may target them as witnesses. Where are they taking them? I need to be with them. I don't know the location. It's classified for their protection. Their protection. I cried. I should be protecting them. I'm their mother. The words came out before I could stop them, a truth my heart knew even if the law didn't recognize it. Ellie, listen to me, Diana's voice was steady. Charles Rain is a desperate man with dangerous connections. The FBI has resources we don't have. The best thing you can do for the children right now is stay safe yourself. I can't just sit here while they're in danger. That's exactly what you need to do, she insisted. Jack made me promise to make sure you don't do anything reckless. You've talked to Jack? When? This morning, briefly, before they were moved. He's scared, Ellie, but not for himself. He's terrified that Rain might come after you for revenge. The thought hadn't even occurred to me. Me? I'm not the one who exposed him. You're the one he framed for murder. You're the reason his crimes came to light. If he can't get to the children, you might be his next target. Catherine called moments later with the same warning, adding that our meeting with CPS had been postponed indefinitely due to security concerns. How long will the children be hidden away? I asked. Until Rain is recaptured, she replied. The FBI isn't taking any chances with their safety. Or with letting me near them, I thought bitterly. Days passed in a haze of fear and isolation. I was advised not to leave my apartment except for essentials. The news was filled with updates on the manhunt for Charles Rain, who seemed to have vanished despite one of the largest fugitive searches in state history. A week after his escape, my prepaid phone rang in the middle of the night. I fumbled for it in the darkness. Hello? Ellie? The voice was small, frightened. My heart stopped. Theo? Is that you? Yeah, he whispered. I'm not supposed to call you. Jack will be mad. Are you okay? Are you safe? I'm scared, he admitted. They keep moving us to different places. Sophia cries at night when she thinks we're asleep. Where are you now? Can you tell me? I don't know exactly. Some cabin. Jack's outside talking to the agents. Sophia's taking a shower. How did you get a phone? I borrowed it from one of the agents, he said, a hint of his old mischief in his voice. She left it charging in the kitchen. Despite everything, I smiled. You always were good at borrowing things. Ellie, his voice dropped lower. Jack's worried but won't admit it. He thinks Charles Rain is going to find us. The FBI won't let that happen, I said with more confidence than I felt. They're going to keep you safe until they catch him. But what about you? Are you safe? The question twisted my heart. Even now, he was worried about me. I'm fine, sweetheart. They're watching my apartment too. That wasn't entirely true. A patrol car drove by occasionally, but nothing like the protection the children had. We should be together, Theo said. We're stronger together. We will be, I promised. As soon as they catch Rain. I should go, he whispered suddenly. Someone's coming. Theo, wait. I love you, Ellie. We all do. The call ended, leaving me clutching the phone in the darkness, tears streaming down my face. The next morning, Catherine called with news that sent ice through my veins. The FBI believes Rain may have identified the location where the children are being kept, she said without preamble. They're moving them again, deeper into protective custody. What does that mean, deeper? It means no communication in or out. Total blackout until Rain is apprehended. For how long? I demanded. As long as necessary, she replied. Ellie, these are standard protocols for witnesses in extreme danger. They're children. They're key witnesses against one of the most dangerous fugitives in the state, she countered. Children who have repeatedly demonstrated they don't follow rules designed to protect them. Like calling me in the middle of the night, I realized. Had someone discovered Theo's call? Was that why they were being isolated further? So I just wait? While a murderer is hunting them. You follow the security protocols the FBI has established for you, Catherine said firmly. And you let me continue working on your case with CPS. This situation is temporary. But temporary could mean weeks, months, more time stolen from us when we'd already lost so much. 3 days later, I woke to pounding on my apartment door. Heart racing, I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole to see Diana Townsend, her face pale with urgency. What's wrong? I asked as soon as I opened the door. Get your things, she said, pushing past me into the apartment. Only what you absolutely need. We have to go now. Go where? What's happened? Charles Rain's associates have been asking questions about this address, she said, grabbing a backpack from my closet and shoving clothes into it. The FBI thinks your location may have been compromised. How? This place is supposed to be confidential. Nothing is truly confidential when enough money is involved, Diana said grimly. The safe house where they're keeping the children has been relocated 3 times in the past week. Now we need to move you too. Where are we going? To the children. Diana paused in her packing. No. They've been taken out of state. I don't even know where they are now. Then I'm not going anywhere, I said firmly. If Rain knows where I am, let him come. Maybe that will draw him away from the children. Diana stared at me. That's exactly the kind of thinking Jack was afraid of. You're not using yourself as bait, Ellie. They're my children. And they need you alive. Diana grabbed my shoulders. They've spent for years fighting to save your life. Don't throw it away now. Before I could respond, my phone rang, the same unknown number from Theo's call. Hello? I answered urgently. Ellie. It was Jack's voice, tight with fear. Are you with Diana? Yes, she's here. Jack, what's happening? We don't have much time, he said. They're monitoring all calls. I need you to go with Diana. Right now. Jack! Please, he interrupted, his voice cracking. I can't worry about you too. We're safe, but you won't be if you stay there. Where are you? Just tell me that much. There was a pause, then, I can't. But we're together, all 3 of us. And we're going to stay that way until this is over. Promise me you'll be careful, I pleaded. Don't do anything reckless. A dry laugh. That's rich coming from you. Jack! I have to go, he said hurriedly. They're coming back. Just remember what you taught us, Ellie. About family. About doing whatever it takes. The line went dead. Diana was watching me, her expression grim. Ready to go now. I nodded, numb with fear, and grabbed the backpack she'd packed. As we left the apartment, I cast one last look at the small space that had been my first taste of freedom in 5 years. On the table lay the few photographs Catherine had managed to recover from my old apartment, pictures of the children and me from that brief, precious year we'd had together. I grabbed them at the last second, tucking them into my pocket. Where are we going? I asked as we hurried to Diana's car. Somewhere Rain and his people won't look, she replied, starting the engine. Somewhere you would never choose to go yourself. I understood her meaning immediately. No. Not there. It's the last place anyone would expect, Diana insisted, pulling away from the curb. And she's the last person they'd think you'd turn to. As we drove through the night toward Maplewood, toward Melissa Rain's house, I gazed out the window at the passing darkness. Somewhere out there were my children, hidden away for their protection. Somewhere out there was Charles Rain, hunting them, and possibly me, for revenge. And here I was, headed to the home of the woman whose husband had destroyed my life, about to put my fate in her hands. The children had saved me from death row, but now we were all trapped in a different kind of prison, separated, hunted, our future together more uncertain than ever. Melissa Rain's estate sat on 5 acres at the edge of Maplewood, a sprawling Tudor-style mansion surrounded by wrought iron fencing and meticulously maintained gardens. As Diana drove through the ornate gates, I felt like I was entering enemy territory. This is a mistake, I muttered, watching security cameras track our car's movement up the long driveway. She's Charles' wife. What if she's helping him? Ex-wife, as of last month, Diana corrected. And she's the reason you're not on death row anymore. Without her evidence against Charles, you'd still be counting down days until your execution. The car stopped in front of massive double doors that opened before Diana could cut the engine. Melissa stood in the doorway, her copper hair pulled back in a severe bun, her face drawn with tension. Quickly, she urged, gesturing us inside. The security system will alert me if anyone approaches, but we shouldn't take chances. The house's interior matched its imposing exterior, soaring ceilings, marble floors, artwork that probably cost more than I'd earned in my lifetime. Blood money, I thought bitterly. Paid for by the crimes that had sent me to prison. I know what you're thinking, Melissa said, leading us through a grand hallway. This house, everything in it, it's all built on suffering. Believe me, I'm aware. Then why stay here? I challenged. She turned to face me, her expression hardening. Because when Charles is recaptured, every asset he owns will be seized. This property is in my name only. I intend to sell it and use the proceeds to make amends, starting with you and the children. I don't want your money. No, but you'll need it, she countered. For attorneys. For a home large enough for 4 people. For therapy for children who've been traumatized repeatedly by the system. She led us to a wood-paneled study and closed the door. The guest wing is being prepared for you. You'll be safe here, the security system is state-of-the-art, and I have 2 private guards on the property at all times. What about the children? I asked. Are they bringing them here too? Diana and Melissa exchanged glances. The FBI hasn't disclosed their location, even to me, Diana admitted. After Theo's call to you, they've tightened security even further. My heart sank. So I'm just supposed to hide here while my children are God knows where, being hunted by a murderer. You're supposed to stay alive, Melissa said bluntly. The children have sacrificed too much to save you for you to throw it away now. That night, I couldn't sleep. The guest room was luxurious, but every shadow seemed threatening, every creak of the old house a potential intruder. Around 3 a.m., I gave up and wandered downstairs, drawn to the soft glow of light from the kitchen. Melissa sat at the island counter, a cup of tea in her hands, still fully dressed despite the hour. You can't sleep either, she observed as I hesitated in the doorway. No. She gestured to the kettle. Tea? Or something stronger? Tea is fine. We sat in uncomfortable silence as she prepared a second cup. When she handed it to me, I noticed the slight tremble in her hands. You're afraid of him too, I said, the realization surprising me. Of course I am. She met my eyes directly. I was married to Charles for 15 years. I know what he's capable of. Why did you stay? If you knew what kind of man he was. She turned her teacup slowly. At first, I didn't know. He was charming, powerful, the heir to the Rain fortune while Victor was the family disappointment. By the time I understood what was happening, I was trapped. There's always a way out, I said, thinking of my own escape from Victor's abuse. Not when they threatened to kill your brother. Her voice was hollow. After I discovered what Charles had done to Victor, I planned to leave. He found out and showed me photos of my brother's house, his children at school. He said if I ever betrayed him, my brother would have an accident just like Victor. I stared at her, seeing her clearly for the first time, not as the wealthy wife of my persecutor, but as another woman who had been controlled through fear. What changed? I asked. Why help Diana and the children now? Because 3 homeless kids showed more courage than I had in 15 years of marriage, she said simply. They risked everything to save you. How could I do any less? Something shifted between us in that moment, not friendship, exactly, but a recognition of shared purpose. Tell me about them, she said suddenly. The children. What were they like before all this? The question caught me off guard. Why do you want to know? Because they've dominated my life for months now, but I've never actually met them. Jack calls me, gives me instructions, asks for resources, but he never talks about himself. About who they really are. I found myself smiling despite everything. Jack was always the protector. Even when he was 12 and half-starved himself, his first concern was always Sophia and Theo. He'd give them his food, tell them stories to distract them from being cold or scared. The memories flooded back, painful but precious. Sophia is brilliant. Math, science, she absorbs everything like a sponge. But she's also so intuitive about people. She can read a room instantly, know exactly what someone is thinking. And Theo? Theo has the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known, I said softly. He was only 6 when I found them, so tiny, with these huge eyes that seemed to take in everything. He had nightmares almost every night that first year. I'd hold him until he fell back asleep. My voice cracked. He's 11 now. Almost 12. I've missed so much. But not everything, Melissa said quietly. Not if we can stop Charles. How? The FBI can't find him. He's eluded a nationwide manhunt for weeks. She hesitated, then stood and walked to a cabinet in the corner. From it, she removed a folder which she placed on the counter between us. Because they don't know him like I do, she said. They don't know where he'd go if every other option was exhausted. I opened the folder to find photographs, maps, and documents, information about properties, shell companies, offshore accounts. What is this? Charles' contingency plan. The escape route he thought only he knew about. Melissa's expression was grim but determined. He has a property in rural Wyoming, purchased through 6 layers of shell companies. Not even his attorneys know about it. How do you know? Because I followed him there once, 3 years ago, when he thought I was visiting my sister. I suspected he was having an affair. Instead, I discovered his backup plan, a compound with its own power supply, security system, even a landing strip for a private plane. I stared at the aerial photographs of an isolated property surrounded by wilderness. Have you told the FBI about this? Not yet. If I had, they would have moved on it immediately, and possibly lost their only advantage. Charles has informants in law enforcement. If they mobilize a team to Wyoming, he'll know. So what are you suggesting? She met my eyes steadily. That we go there ourselves. Not to confront him, just to confirm if he's there. Once we know, we can alert the FBI with precise information. That's insane, I said, pushing away from the counter. We're not trained for something like that. And what about the children? I'm not leaving them vulnerable while we go on some vigilante mission. The children are safer with the FBI than they would be here. Diana's voice came from the doorway. She stood there in sweatpants and a t-shirt, her hair disheveled from sleep. And this isn't vigilante justice. It's intelligence gathering. You knew about this plan? I asked incredulously. Diana joined us at the counter, glancing through the folder. Melissa contacted me yesterday. I've been considering it. It's too dangerous, I insisted. More dangerous than waiting for Charles to find you? Or the children? Melissa challenged. He won't stop, Ellie. Not until he's eliminated every threat to his freedom. That includes all of you. I looked between the 2 women, the private investigator who had risked her career to save me, and the wife of my persecutor who had finally found the courage to turn against him. Even if I agreed to this insanity, I said slowly, how would we even get to Wyoming without being tracked? I'm a recently released prisoner. My every movement is probably being monitored. By the same FBI agents who can't find Charles, Diana pointed out. Besides, Catherine filed paperwork yesterday stating you're residing at a halfway house in Nashville while your case with CPS proceeds. No one official is looking for you right now. This is crazy, I murmured, but I found myself studying the maps more closely. The thought of doing something, anything, to end this nightmare was tempting after weeks of helpless waiting. We leave tomorrow night, Melissa said, taking my scrutiny as agreement. I have a private plane. We can be in Wyoming by morning. And then what? We just spy on an armed murderer from the bushes. We confirm his location, then alert federal authorities with exact coordinates, Diana clarified. No confrontation, no heroics. I should have refused. I should have insisted we leave everything to the professionals. But after 5 years in prison and weeks of separation from the children, the opportunity to take action, to do something that might bring this nightmare closer to its end, was irresistible. Fine, I said finally. But we do this carefully. And at the first sign of real danger, we call in the FBI regardless of whether we've confirmed his presence. Diana nodded. Agreed. Melissa stood to leave, pausing at the doorway. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be challenging. After she left, Diana studied me with concern. You don't have to do this, you know. You could stay here while Melissa and I check the Wyoming property. I shook my head. If there's even a chance this could help reunite me with the children sooner, I have to try. Jack wouldn't approve, she said mildly. He's been very clear about keeping you safe at all costs. Jack isn't here, I replied. And I'm still the adult in this relationship, even if the law doesn't recognize it. As I finally returned to my room, exhaustion overtaking anxiety, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. We're okay. Together. Miss you. Stay safe. No signature, but it didn't need one. Somehow, despite all the security, Sophia had found a way to reach out. The message was simple but carried immeasurable comfort. They were still together, still fighting. I texted back, "Love you all. This will be over soon." More than a promise, it was a vow. Whatever it took, I would end Charles Rain's threat and bring my family back together. The next evening, we departed in Melissa's private plane, a sleek six-seater piloted by a man who asked no questions and required no flight plan. Diana sat beside me, reviewing satellite images of our destination on a tablet. The property has 3 main structures, she explained, pointing to the screen. The main house, a garaged workshop, and what appears to be a guest cabin. Our best observation point will be this ridge to the east, which overlooks the entire compound but stays within the tree line for cover. How close do we need to get? I asked, studying the rugged terrain surrounding the buildings. Close enough to confirm his presence with photos, then we withdraw and contact the FBI, Diana said firmly. This is reconnaissance only, Ellie. Melissa joined us from the cockpit. We'll land at a small airstrip about 30 miles from the property. I've arranged for a vehicle with off-road capabilities. We should reach the observation point by sunrise. The plan was methodical, professional, and still utterly terrifying. I was an ex-waitress and former death row inmate, not a special forces operative. Yet here I was, flying across the country to spy on the man who had framed me for murder. What if he's not there? I asked suddenly. What if this is all for nothing? Then we cross one possibility off the list, Diana replied pragmatically. But Melissa's instincts about this are sound. If Charles needed a true emergency hideout, this would be it. As promised, we landed at a tiny airstrip just before dawn. A rugged SUV waited as arranged, and Melissa drove us through increasingly remote terrain as the sun rose over the mountains. Eventually, the road gave way to little more than a trail, forcing us to continue on foot for the last mile. The Wyoming wilderness was beautiful but unforgiving, dense forests giving way to rocky outcroppings, the air thin and cold even in the growing daylight. We hiked in silence, following Melissa's lead until she signaled us to stop at the edge of a clearing. The ridge is just ahead, she whispered. From here, we move with extreme caution. No talking, stay low. We crept forward through the underbrush until we reached the vantage point Diana had identified. Below us, maybe half a mile distant, sat the compound, exactly as the satellite images had shown. The main house was an oversized log cabin with a wraparound porch and large windows facing the mountains. The workshop stood nearby, and the smaller guest cabin was positioned slightly apart from the others. Diana produced a pair of high-powered binoculars from her backpack and scanned the property. Vehicle in the garage, she murmured. Late model Range Rover. And there's smoke coming from the main house chimney. Someone's definitely there, Melissa confirmed, taking her turn with the binoculars. But is it Charles or just a caretaker? For hours, we watched in rotation, documenting anything that might help identify the occupants. Around midday, our patience was rewarded when a figure emerged onto the porch of the main house. That's him, Melissa whispered, her voice tight. That's Charles. I grabbed the binoculars and confirmed what she'd said. Even from this distance, I recognized the man whose brother's murder had sent me to death row. He looked different from his courtroom photos, his normally clean-shaven face now sporting a beard, his designer suits replaced by flannel and jeans, but unmistakably Charles Rain. We need to document this and contact the FBI immediately, Diana said, already reaching for her satellite phone. That's when we heard the crunch of footsteps behind us. We froze, exchanging panicked glances. Slowly, Diana reached for the handgun holstered at her hip, a precaution I'd protested but now appreciated. "Don't move," a man's voice ordered. "Hands where I can see them." Slowly, we raised our hands and turned to face a tall, bearded man aiming a rifle directly at us. He wore camouflage clothing and moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. "Well, well," he said, his eyes narrowing as they settled on Melissa. "Mrs. Rain. The boss said you might come looking for him." "We're just hikers," Diana tried, but the man laughed. "Hikers don't carry satellite phones and surveillance equipment." His gaze shifted to me, and his expression changed to one of recognition. "You're the woman from the news. The one who was on death row." "You work for Charles," I said, my mouth dry with fear. "You're helping a fugitive." "I'm helping a friend who's been framed," he corrected. "Just like you were. Difference is, he had the resources to escape." "He wasn't framed," Melissa said, her voice stronger than I expected. "He killed Victor. He killed Martin Webb. I've seen the evidence." The man's expression hardened. "Save it for the boss. He's been waiting for a family reunion." He gestured with the rifle. "Down the hill. Now. If you take us down there, we're dead," I said bluntly. "That's not my concern." He produced zip ties from his pocket. "Hands behind your backs. All of you." As he secured Diana's wrists first, I caught her eye. Something in her expression told me to be ready. The moment the man moved to Melissa, Diana launched herself backward, slamming her shoulder into his chest despite her bound hands. The rifle discharged into the air as they fell, giving me the opportunity to tackle his legs. Melissa, still unbound, scrambled for the fallen weapon. What followed was chaotic, a desperate struggle on the forest floor, all four of us fighting for control of the rifle. The man was stronger than any of us individually, but together we managed to keep the weapon away from him. Then came the sound that changed everything, the distant whump-whump of helicopter blades cutting through the air. The man froze, his head turning toward the sound. "That's not one of ours." Diana used his momentary distraction to slam her bound hands into his throat, sending him gasping to the ground. Melissa finally secured the rifle, aiming it with shaking hands. "Cut us free," Diana ordered, and Melissa used a knife from the man's belt to slice through our zip ties. The helicopter sound grew louder, appearing over the ridge, a black tactical aircraft with no markings. "FBI?" I asked hopefully. Diana frowned. "Maybe. Or." Our attacker started laughing despite his pain. "You think you're the only ones who figured out where he'd go? You led them right to him." "Led who?" Melissa demanded. "Webb's partners," he gasped. "The people Charles and Victor were laundering money for. They want their millions back, and Charles dead for drawing attention to their operation." The helicopter circled the compound below, then descended toward the clearing in front of the main house. From our vantage point, we could see Charles emerging, frantically running toward the workshop. "We need to call the FBI now," Diana said, reaching for the satellite phone. "Wait," I said, grabbing her arm. "Look!" 3 figures had emerged from the tree line opposite the compound, moving with purpose toward the main house while the helicopter drew Charles's attention. Even from this distance, I recognized them instantly. Jack's tall frame. Sophia's quick, efficient movements. Theo staying close behind his older siblings. "No," I whispered in horror. "No, no, no." "The children," Melissa breathed. "How did they find this place?" "Same way we did," Diana said grimly. "They followed Charles's money trail." "We have to get down there," I was already moving, caution abandoned in the face of my children walking into mortal danger. Diana caught my arm. "Ellie, think. If we rush in blindly, we'll only put them in more danger. Those are my children." I twisted free of her grip. And we won't help them by getting ourselves killed, she insisted. We need a plan. Our captive was securing his zip ties with surprising efficiency despite his injuries. You're all dead anyway, he muttered. When those helicopter guys realize Charles doesn't have their money, they'll kill everyone on the property. Melissa aimed the rifle at him. Who are they? How many? Ukrainian mafia, he said with a pained smile. And enough to handle a couple of women and some street kids. The situation was deteriorating by the second. Below, we could see armed men exiting the helicopter, fanning out toward the main house, while Jack, Sophia, and Theo continued their approach from the opposite side, apparently unaware of the new arrivals. Call the FBI, I told Diana. Tell them everything, Charles, the helicopter, the children. Then do what you want, but I'm going down there. Not alone, Melissa said, checking the rifle. I'm coming with you. Diana looked between us, then cursed under her breath. Fine. I'll make the call and be right behind you. But we need a distraction. Our eyes fell on the captive, who shrank back against a tree. Don't even think about it, he warned. 10 minutes later, we had the beginnings of a plan, desperate and dangerous, but better than nothing. We secured our captive to a tree, gagged but positioned where he could be found by the FBI when they arrived. Diana had reached someone at the bureau, conveying the coordinates and the situation with urgent clarity. 30 minutes, she told us as she ended the call. That's how long until tactical support can reach us. The children don't have 30 minutes, I said, watching in terror as Jack led Sophia and Theo closer to the main house, still unaware of the armed men circling from the other side. Then we create that distraction and get them out, Melissa said, hefting the rifle. Ready. We split up, Diana circling toward the children's position to intercept them, Melissa heading to higher ground where she could cover us, and me moving toward the workshop where Charles had fled. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear anything else as I crept between trees, keeping low as Melissa had taught us. The armed men from the helicopter, 5 that I could count, were focused on the main house, clearly believing Charles was inside. From my new position, I could see Jack more clearly. He moved with startling competence, hand signals directing Sophia and Theo as they advanced using trees and outbuildings for cover. Whatever they had learned in 4 years on their own, it included tactical movement that would impress military personnel. Diana was closing in on their position. Just a few more minutes and she would reach them, warn them, get them to safety. Then everything went wrong at once. Charles burst from the workshop, sprinting for the trees, directly into the path of the children. One of the armed men spotted him and opened fire, sending Charles diving behind a woodpile mere yards from where Theo crouched. Jack pulled his younger brother back, but it was too late. Charles had seen them. What happened next unfolded like a nightmare in slow motion. Charles grabbed Theo, yanking the boy against his chest as a human shield. Sophia screamed. Jack lunged forward but froze when Charles produced a handgun, pressing it to Theo's temple. Stay back! Charles shouted, his voice carrying across the clearing. The armed men from the helicopter had also spotted the commotion and were now moving cautiously toward the standoff, weapons raised but unwilling to fire with a child in the crossfire. I couldn't wait for Diana or Melissa or the FBI. My child, my Theo, was being held at gunpoint by the man who had framed me for murder. Without conscious thought, I broke from cover and ran toward them. Charles! I shouted. Let him go. It's me you want. Every head turned in my direction. Charles's eyes widened with shock and then narrowed with calculation. Eleanor Deckard, he called back, his grip on Theo visibly tightening. The woman who wouldn't stay on death row where I put her. I kept walking forward, hands raised. Let the boy go. Take me instead. Ellie, no. Jack shouted, his face contorted with fear. Mom! Sophia cried, using the word for the first time in my hearing. That word, Mom, sent a surge of strength through me. Yes, I was their mother. Not by birth, not by law, but by choice. By love. by the unbreakable bond we had forged through years of separation and struggle. "I'm not negotiating with you, Charles," I said, still moving steadily forward. "I'm telling you how this ends. You let my son go, or you die right here." Charles laughed. "You're unarmed, alone, and surrounded by men with guns. How exactly do you plan to kill me?" "She's not alone," Melissa's voice rang out as she emerged from the trees, rifle aimed at her husband. "And she's not the only one you betrayed." Charles's expression shifted to one of genuine surprise. "Melissa? You're with her?" "I'm with Justice," she replied. "Something you've run from your entire life." While they spoke, I kept moving closer, now only 20 feet from where Charles held Theo. The boy's eyes were wide with fear, but there was trust there too. "Trust in me." "The FBI is on their way," I said to Charles. "And I'm guessing these gentlemen from the helicopter aren't here to rescue you." One of the armed men stepped forward. "We want what's ours, Rain." "The money." "All of it." Charles's eyes darted between threats, his position deteriorating by the second. "I can get your money," he said to the man. "But I need insurance to walk out of here." He tightened his grip on Theo. That's when Diana finally reached Jack and Sophia, pulling them into the tree line for protection. Charles was becoming increasingly isolated, his options diminishing. I was now close enough to see the sweat on his brow, the tremor in the hand holding the gun to Theo's head. "It's over, Charles," I said quietly. "You've lost everything. Don't lose your soul too by hurting a child." Something flickered in his eyes, perhaps the first genuine moment of doubt I'd seen. For a heartbeat, I thought he might actually surrender. Then the distant sound of approaching helicopters broke the tension, FBI tactical teams incoming. Charles made his decision. He shoved Theo violently away and raised his gun, not toward the boy, but toward me. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Charles crumpled to the ground, blood blooming on his chest from Melissa's perfect shot. The armed men from the helicopter scattered, racing back toward their aircraft as the FBI's arrival became imminent. I ran to Theo, gathering him into my arms as he sobbed against my chest. Jack and Sophia broke from Diana's protection and sprinted toward us, falling into a group embrace that felt like coming home after years lost in the wilderness. "You found me," I whispered, holding them all as tightly as I could. "We always find each other," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's what you taught us." As FBI helicopters appeared overhead, as agents rappelled down to secure the scene, as Melissa stood over her husband's body with grim vindication, I clung to my children, my family, and knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever separate us again. The universe had tried its hardest to keep us apart. It had failed. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of debriefings, medical examinations, and legal consultations. The FBI established a secure command center in Cheyenne, where we were taken after the confrontation at Charles's compound. Despite their efforts to separate us for individual interviews, I refused to let the children out of my sight, and they were equally determined to stay with me. "We understand your concern, Ms. Deckard," said Special Agent Carver, the lead investigator assigned to our case. "But we need to document each person's testimony independently." "Then you'll do it with all of us in the same room," Jack insisted, his arm protectively around Theo's shoulders. "We've been separated enough." To my surprise, the FBI eventually conceded, allowing us to remain together during questioning. The children's testimony was detailed and precise, how they had tracked Charles through financial records Theo had discovered, how they had eluded their protective detail to reach Wyoming, how they had planned to gather evidence of Charles's presence to force the FBI to act. "You 3 deliberately escaped federal protection," Agent Carver said, his expression a mixture of disapproval and reluctant admiration. "That's a serious matter. More serious than letting an innocent woman die on death row." Sophia challenged, the fire in her eyes reminding me of the fierce little girl I'd found behind that dumpster years ago. "Or letting a murderer go free," Jack added. Agent Carver sighed. "Your intentions were admirable. Your methods were not." As the debriefings continued, Catherine Brennan arrived, having flown in at Diana's request. Her normally composed demeanor cracked when she saw us together. "You all could have been killed," she scolded, though her eyes were suspiciously bright. "There are proper channels for these things." "Proper channels were taking too long," I said simply. She shook her head, then turned to business. "We have multiple issues to address. Your exoneration is now complete, Ellie. The Attorney General has issued a formal apology, and there will be compensation for your wrongful imprisonment." "And the children?" I asked, the question that mattered more than anything else. Catherine's expression turned cautious. "That's more complicated. They're still technically wards of the state who have been living outside the system for years. There's also the matter of their activities during that time." "You mean saving my life?" I said sharply. "I mean computer hacking, identity fraud, and evading federal custody," she corrected gently. "However justified their motives. So they're heroes in the media but criminals in the eyes of the law," Diana observed from where she sat by the window. "Typical." She wasn't wrong. In the 36 hours since Charles Rains' death, the story had exploded across national media. 3 homeless children who had saved an innocent woman from death row, exposed a murderer, and evaded both the FBI and international criminals to deliver justice. The death row family was trending nationwide. "Actually, that public support may be our strongest asset," Catherine said. "I've been in discussions with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Given the extraordinary circumstances and the children's role in exposing Charles Rains' crimes, they're willing to consider alternatives to standard juvenile proceedings." "What kind of alternatives?" Jack asked, immediately alert. "A hearing before a federal judge to determine your status," Catherine explained. "It would address both any potential charges and your guardianship situation simultaneously." "When?" I pressed. 3 days from now, in Denver federal court. 3 days to determine whether we could finally be a family legally after years of fighting to be together. It felt both eternally long and impossibly short. On the morning of the hearing, we gathered in a hotel suite in Denver, all of us uncharacteristically quiet as we prepared. The children had been provided with new clothes for court, Jack in a suit that made him look startlingly adult, Sophia in a modest blue dress, and Theo in khakis and a button-down shirt that he kept fidgeting with. "Stop tugging at your collar," Sophia told him, batting his hands away to straighten his tie. "It's choking me," he complained. "It's called dressing for success," she retorted, though her own nervousness showed in the way she kept smoothing her dress. Jack paced by the window, his reflection revealing the tension in his jaw. At 17, he stood on the cusp of adulthood, too old for traditional adoption, but too young to be fully independent under normal circumstances. Everything about our situation defied normal parameters. I watched them, these extraordinary children who had survived abandonment, separation, and danger, who had outwitted the system, exposed a murderer, and saved me from execution. Today, that same system would judge whether they belonged with me. "Whatever happens in that courtroom," I said, drawing their attention, "we are a family. No judge, no piece of paper, no system can change that." Jack stopped pacing. "But it can keep us apart." "Not anymore," I said firmly. "I'm not on death row now. I'm free. Even in the worst-case scenario, you'll all be 18 in a few years, and then no one can tell us we can't be together." "A few years is too long," Sophia said, her voice cracking. "We've already lost 5 years." I crossed the room and took her hands. "We haven't lost anything. We found each other against impossible odds. We fought for each other when the whole world was against us. That's not loss, that's the greatest victory I can imagine." A knock at the door interrupted us, Catherine, Diana, and Melissa arriving to escort us to court. "Ready?" Catherine asked, her briefcase bulging with documents. "As we'll ever be," Jack answered for all of us. The federal courthouse was imposing, all marble columns and solemn architecture designed to intimidate. More disconcerting was the crowd of reporters and spectators gathered outside, held back by security barriers. Your story has captured the nation's attention, Catherine explained as we were escorted through a side entrance to avoid the crowds. The judge has barred cameras from the courtroom, but there's intense public interest. In the hallway outside courtroom 3, we found unexpected allies waiting: Darren Hudson, my former co-worker from the diner, Mrs. Martinez, the school secretary who had helped enroll the children without asking too many questions, even Mrs. Jameson, my former landlord who had looked the other way when 3 children moved into my single-occupancy apartment. "We're here to testify for you," Darren said, embracing me awkwardly. "To tell them what a good mother you were to these kids, even before all this craziness." I blinked back tears, touched by the support from people who had once stood on the periphery of our lives. Catherine ushered us into the courtroom, where more surprises awaited. The gallery was filled with strangers holding small signs, #Justice for Ellie and #Keep the Family Together. Some wore t-shirts with our photographs, images captured from Jack's viral broadcast. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Marianne Chen entered, a petite woman with steel-grey hair and penetrating eyes that swept the courtroom with practiced authority. "Be seated," she instructed. "This is an unusual proceeding addressing multiple interconnected issues. Let me be clear from the outset, this is not a media circus. It is a court of law. Any disruptions will result in immediate removal." Her gaze fell on us, me sitting between Catherine and Diana, the children directly behind us with Melissa. "I've reviewed the extensive documentation submitted by Ms. Brennan on behalf of Eleanor Deckard and the 3 minors known as Jack Keating, Sophia Alvarez, and Theodore Wright." She looked up from her papers. "Are these your legal names?" Jack stood. "No, Your Honor. Our birth certificates list us as Jackson Reeves, Sophia Reeves, and Theodore Reeves. We're biological siblings. We adopted different surnames while evading the system." The judge nodded without comment. "This hearing will address 3 primary issues. First, the legal status of the minors who have been living outside state supervision for approximately 4 years. Second, any potential charges arising from activities during that period. And third, the petition for guardianship filed by Ms. Deckard." She looked directly at me. "Ms. Deckard, while your wrongful conviction has been overturned, the fact remains that you had no legal right to harbor these children initially, nor do you have any biological or previously established legal connection to them. Why should this court grant you guardianship now?" I stood, heart pounding. "Because we chose each other, Your Honor. 5 years ago, I found 3 children whom society had failed. I didn't set out to become their mother, but that's what happened, not through biology or legal documents, but through daily acts of love and care. Acts that were technically illegal," she pointed out. "Yes," I acknowledged. "But sometimes doing the right thing means breaking rules that are wrong. These children were going to be separated in foster care. They had already run away multiple times. The system was failing them. And you believed you could do better. I knew I could love them," I said simply. "Sometimes that's enough." The judge's expression remained unreadable. "Mr. Reeves," she addressed Jack, "you're nearly 18. Ms. Reeves is 14. And Theodore is 11. You've been living independently, outside the law, for 4 years. How did you manage this?" Jack stood, shoulders straight. "Initially, we survived through a combination of under-the-table jobs and, yes, some illegal activities, primarily identity creation and small-scale financial fraud. I'm not proud of those methods, but I had 2 younger siblings to protect and a wrongfully convicted guardian to save." "And you believe these actions were justified?" "I believe they were necessary," Jack replied. "We tried working within the system first. We contacted Ellie's public defender dozens of times. We filed reports about Charles Rain's suspicious behavior with police. No one would listen to 3 homeless kids. So you took matters into your own hands," Judge Chen observed. "We did what no one else would do," Jack said firmly. "We saved an innocent woman from execution." The judge turned to Sophia. "Ms. Reeves, during your time outside state care, did you continue your education?" Sophia stood, her voice steadier than I expected. "Yes, Your Honor. I've completed all standard curricula for my grade level through online programs. I can provide testing scores to verify my academic standing. "Are you, Theodore?" the judge asked more gently. Theo stood, fidgeting slightly. "I study too. Jack makes me do math and reading every day, even weekends. And I learned computers. I can code in 3 languages now." A hint of a smile touched Judge Chen's lips before disappearing. "The court acknowledges that despite your unorthodox situation, efforts were made to maintain educational development." The proceedings continued for hours, testimony from character witnesses, experts on child welfare, even Diana recounting our pursuit of Charles Rain. Throughout it all, I kept glancing at the children, drawing strength from their presence, terrified this might be one of our last days together if the judge ruled against us. Finally, Catherine presented her closing argument, laying out our proposed solution. I would be granted guardianship of Sophia and Theo, while Jack, who would turn 18 in 2 months, would be legally emancipated but continue living with us as a family. "These children have demonstrated exceptional resilience, intelligence, and moral courage," Catherine concluded. "They've stayed together against overwhelming odds, pursued justice at great personal risk, and ultimately exposed a murderer that the system had failed to identify. They have earned the right to define their own family." The representative from Child Protective Services countered with arguments about proper protocols and the precedent our case might set, but even he seemed uncomfortable with his position, acknowledging the unique circumstances repeatedly. When all arguments had concluded, Judge Chen removed her glasses and addressed us directly. "I've been on the bench for 27 years, she said. "In that time, I've seen thousands of family cases, but none quite like this one. The law provides frameworks designed to protect children, but occasionally, those frameworks fail to account for extraordinary circumstances." She leaned forward. "What I see before me is a family, not created by biology or traditional legal processes, but forged through shared hardship, mutual protection, and profound love. Mr. Reeves, Ms. Reeves, and Theodore have demonstrated capabilities far beyond their years. Ms. Deckard has shown unflagging commitment to these children, even from death row." My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear her next words. "It is the finding of this court that the best interests of these children would not be served by disrupting the family unit they have created." She picked up her gavel. "I hereby grant Eleanor Deckard's petition for guardianship of Sophia and Theodore Reeves, and I approve Jackson Reeves' petition for emancipation, with the provision that he may reside with his siblings and guardian if he so chooses." The gavel came down with a crack that seemed to release years of tension from my body. Sophia grabbed my hand so tightly it hurt. Theo let out a whoop that earned him a stern look from the bailiff but an almost imperceptible smile from the judge. Jack remained frozen, as if afraid to believe what he'd just heard. Additionally, Judge Chen continued, regarding potential charges arising from activities during the past 4 years, this court finds that the extraordinary circumstances and clear public benefit resulting from those actions justify a complete dismissal of all potential juvenile charges. Another crack of the gavel. This family has endured enough punishment for crimes they didn't commit. It's time for healing to begin. The courtroom erupted in cheers despite the judge's earlier warning against disruptions. She allowed it for a moment before calling for order. "Ms. Deckard," she said as the noise subsided, "these children moved mountains to save you. Now it's your turn to give them the stable, loving home they deserve." "I will, Your Honor," I promised, tears streaming freely down my face. "Every day for the rest of my life." As we exited the courtroom, the children surrounding me like a protective formation, reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed. But all I could focus on was the miracle that had just occurred. We were legally, officially, finally a family. Outside on the courthouse steps, Jack finally spoke, his voice uncharacteristically emotional. "We did it. Actually did it. No more running," Sophia said wonderingly. "No more fake names. No more separate foster homes," Theo added, his small hand finding mine. I pulled them all into an embrace, uncaring of the cameras capturing the moment. "No more separation," I vowed. "Ever." Diana approached, her usual professional demeanor softened with genuine happiness. Congratulations! You've made history today. Not just legally, but by showing what family really means. Melissa stood slightly apart, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. When I caught her eye, she gave a small nod of acknowledgement, perhaps respect, perhaps envy for the family she'd never had with Charles. What happens now? Theo asked as we prepared to leave, the reality of our new freedom just beginning to sink in. I looked at my children, my legal, official children, and felt possibility unfurling before us like an open road. Now, I said, we go home. Jack raised an eyebrow. We don't actually have a home yet. Details, I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. We have each other. The rest we'll figure out together. As we descended the courthouse steps toward our uncertain but united future, reporters called out final questions. Ellie, what's next for the death row family? I paused, considering my answer carefully. Life, I said simply. A real life, together. Home, as it turned out, was not a place we found but one we created, slowly, deliberately, with both caution and hope. 6 months after the courtroom victory that legally united us, we stood in the driveway of a modest 3-bedroom house on the outskirts of Denver. The compensation from my wrongful conviction had provided the down payment, while Jack's new legitimate job at a cybersecurity firm, which had hired him immediately after learning of his self-taught skills, helped with the mortgage. What do you think? I asked as we surveyed the slightly weathered exterior, the small yard with patchy grass, the crooked mailbox with our name, Deckard Reeves, freshly painted on the side. It needs work, Jack observed, ever practical even at 18. It's perfect, Sophia countered, already eyeing the maple tree that would be ideal for a reading nook. It has a basement I can turn into a computer lab, Theo added enthusiastically. For legal coding only, I reminded him with a smile. Obviously, he replied, though the mischievous glint in his eye reminded me that some habits would take time to break. As we carried boxes from the moving truck, neighbors watched curiously from porches and windows. Our story had made national headlines, and though the media frenzy had died down, we still occasionally found ourselves recognized in public. I wondered what these neighbors saw when they looked at us, heroes, criminals, celebrities, or just a strange family with an unusual history. That evening, sitting among half-unpacked boxes eating takeout pizza, I looked at each of my children and marveled at how far we had come. Jack, now legally an adult, had transformed from the suspicious 12-year-old I'd found behind a dumpster into a confident young man with remarkable skills and unshakable loyalty. The job offer from CyberShield Technologies had come with a salary that still made him uncomfortable. He'd survived so long on so little that financial security felt almost suspicious. I keep waiting for them to realize I don't have a college degree, he admitted one night. Or even a high school diploma. You have something better, I told him. Real-world experience and proven ability. Besides, you can get your GED anytime. Sophia at 15 was blossoming academically, having tested into advanced placement classes at her new high school. The quiet, watchful girl who had once hoarded food in her pockets now captained the school's debate team, channeling her fierce protectiveness into structured arguments that left opponents scrambling. Ms. Abernathy says I should consider pre-law, she told us over dinner one night, trying to sound casual though her eye shone with pride. Attorney Sophia Reeves, Theo tested the title. You could represent other families like ours. There are no other families like ours, she replied, but her expression turned thoughtful, considering the possibility. And Theo, at 12, remained our heart, still sweet-natured despite everything he'd endured, still capable of finding joy in small things, but now with an almost supernatural talent for computer systems that both impressed and occasionally terrified me. It's just patterns, he tried to explain when I marveled at how quickly he could solve coding problems. I see how things connect when others don't. That ability to see connections others missed had helped save my life. Now, it was earning him invitations to specialized STEM programs and coding competitions. My own healing was more complicated. After 5 years on death row followed by months of legal battles, adjusting to normal life came with challenges. I found employment at a non-profit that worked with wrongfully convicted individuals, using my experience to help others navigate the system that had failed me so catastrophically. Some nights I still woke gasping from nightmares of execution or separation from the children. On those nights, I would quietly check each bedroom, reassuring myself that we were together, safe, free. Diana visited often, having become something between a friend and an honorary aunt to the children. Her private investigation business had exploded after our case made headlines, but she always made time for us. "You changed my life too, you know," she told me one afternoon as we watched the children, no longer children, really, working in the backyard, building a deck under Jack's direction. "How so?" I asked. "Before your case, I was taking cheating spouse photos and insurance fraud investigations," she said. "Now I work almost exclusively with innocence projects. Better work, better sleep at night." Even Melissa remained in our orbit, though more distantly. After testifying against her husband's criminal associates, she had sold the estate in Maplewood and moved to California, seeking a fresh start away from the Rain family shadow. She sent birthday gifts to the children and occasional emails checking on our progress. "I'm still working on making amends," she wrote in one message. "I've established a foundation to help families separated by wrongful convictions. Would you consider serving on the board?" Slowly, we established new routines and traditions: Sunday movie nights where we took turns selecting films, monthly adventure days exploring our new state, and most importantly, family dinner every night where we shared highs and lows from our days, a ritual that helped us process both past trauma and present challenges. "I got an A on my history project," Sophia announced one evening, a year after moving into our house. "My coding team qualified for nationals," Theo added. "CyberShield offered me a promotion," Jack said, trying to sound nonchalant though his pride was evident. "And I've been asked to testify before the state legislature about reforms to the appeals process for capital cases." I completed our round of updates. We'd established a good life, stable, productive, happy in ways I'd never dared hope for during those dark years on death row. But healing isn't linear, as we discovered one rainy Saturday afternoon when a car backfired in our neighborhood, sending Theo diving under the dining room table in panic, his breathing rapid and shallow. Jack and Sophia responded instantly, Sophia sliding under the table beside him while Jack positioned himself protectively nearby, a well-practiced formation from their years on the run. "We're safe," Sophia murmured to her younger brother. "We're home. Charles is gone. No one's coming for us." I joined them under the table, the four of us huddled in a tableau that would have seemed bizarre to any normal family but made perfect sense to us. "I know it's stupid," Theo whispered when his breathing finally steadied. "It was just a car." "It's not stupid," I assured him. "Our brains and bodies remember danger. It takes time to teach them we're safe now." "Will it ever go away completely?" Sophia asked. "The fear?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But I think it will get smaller, more manageable. And we have each other when it feels too big." We had all started therapy, another benefit of the wrongful conviction settlement, working through the complex trauma we'd experienced both separately and together. Some sessions we attended individually, others as a family, gradually developing healthier coping mechanisms and deeper understanding of our unique bonds. UFA represent one of the most remarkable examples of post-traumatic growth I've ever encountered, our family therapist, Dr. Lewis, observed during one session. "You've not merely survived extreme adversity, you've transformed it into something powerful. Powerful enough to change laws, as it turned out." 2 years after our courtroom victory, I stood beside the governor as he signed the Deckard-Reeves Act, comprehensive legislation reforming everything from death row appeals procedures to foster care policies designed to keep siblings together. "Your family's story made these changes possible," he told me after the ceremony. "You put human faces on systemic failures that were too easy to ignore." The children, I still thought of them that way, though Jack was now 20 and working full-time while taking online college courses, Sophia was 17 and fielding early college recruitment letters, and Theo was 14 and already taking advanced programming classes at the community college, stood in the audience, watching with expressions that mixed pride with the wariness that never entirely left us in official settings. Later that night, as we celebrated with cake in our now fully renovated kitchen, Jack raised his glass of sparkling cider in a toast. To Mom, he said, using the title that had once felt awkward but now came naturally. Who taught us that family isn't about blood or paperwork? It's about who you choose, and who chooses you back, every single day. To us, Sophia added. For staying together when the whole world tried to pull us apart. To home, Theo concluded. The one we built ourselves. I looked around at these extraordinary people who had saved my life in every way a life can be saved, and felt a completeness I had never imagined possible. 5 years had passed since that courtroom victory. 7 years since Jack's broadcast had exposed Charles Rains' crimes. 10 years since I'd found 3 homeless children behind a dumpster on the coldest night of December. The journey from that alley to this kitchen had been improbable, dangerous, heartbreaking, and ultimately triumphant. We had been mocked, separated, hunted, and nearly destroyed. We had broken rules, hacked systems, and defied authorities. We had saved each other, again and again. Now, we were just a family, extraordinary in our ordinariness, remarkable in our routines, healing in our wholeness. As I blew out the candles on the cake commemorating the new law named for our family, I made a silent wish, not for anything we needed, but in gratitude for everything we'd become. Everyone had mocked me for taking in 3 homeless children all those years ago. No one was mocking us now. If our story has touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of supporters. I'd love to hear in the comments which part of our journey resonated most with you, or what other stories of extraordinary families you'd like me to share. Thank you for being part of our extended family through this incredible 10-year journey from death row to home.